Hey everybody, welcome to the CoinGeek weekly live stream. I am checking my microphone. Welcome. So if you could like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and do all the other stuff, let the world know that the CoinGeek weekly live stream is happening now. Share across social media. Let them know that we will take your questions, comments, blessings, cursings, grapes, gripes, or gropes live here in the troll box if you can get them past Mr. Brandon Ward. We have the Ward man at the keyboard today, doing the operational part of the show, so I can focus on my silky smooth voice and entertaining my guests. Baby, how we all doing? So I'm a little tired today. I accidentally woke up about an hour earlier than I should have, so I normally get up at 4:30. That's right, 4:30 in the morning to cover this Satoshi trial stuff. So roll out of bed, do my calisthenics like Winnie the Pooh, and then I get myself my coffee and chill out on the couch and let the sun come up while I listen to Solicitor Huff freak out about his his glasses and his pen and everything else. So I accidentally woke up at about 3 this morning, just for whatever reason. Like, I think I just had to kind of roll out of bed and use the facilities the way one might in the middle of the night, and glance at my watch and say, oh, okay, I gotta be up in about an hour and a half. And then I was ruminating about having to get up in an hour and a half, and so I really was just up since about 3. I really tried to go back to sleep, and then I had to quit after it was clear that even if I fell asleep, I'm only gonna get another little bit of sleep, and so I should just get up and go. So I was up till about 3 a.m. So when court ended early today, I took the opportunity to cuddle up a little bit and take a little nap, which is something I literally never do. So it was pretty nice. Thanks for everybody sending well wishes on my journey here as I cover the trial for you. As you may be aware, there has not been official video CoinGeek coverage and stuff, partially because of my surgery. I couldn't make the trip, and all of that kind of happened suddenly. But yeah, ultimately, the show must go on. People demand to know what's going on line by line with the Satoshi trial, and so I've been up and giving you coverage as best I can. So that's been my goal, and doing my best. So everybody, thanks for the threads. Thanks for the kind words and the tips, and for retweeting and everything else. It really, really helps. So everybody, thank you. But this is not going to be a COPA show. We will, of course, take some COPA related questions if you like. Please fill the troll box if you can get the questions past Brandon Ward, which should be relatively easy. He's an American. We normally have Alex Moon, who is, he wants to make sure that the spelling and grammar is appropriate before he endorses the things that are put on the air. He's a bit of a stickler, which is a little frustrating for me as an American, but ultimately it is the value of having a British man behind the keyboard, is that he keeps everything wrangled just right. No, I love Alex. He's he is rock solid people. Frankly, he's one of my favorite people in the whole world. I really like working with him, and he does a great job. And frankly, he's also been there it is. Careful there. He's got those heavy hands too, man. That guy punches like a friggin' mule kicks. But no, and anyways, Mr. Moon's great. He is taking a week off because they're doing all kinds of other stuff. Everybody's on weird schedules with the trial stuff going on. So we got Brandon Ward at the keyboard. Brandon Ward is another South Floridian, just like myself. So we do occasionally get together and hang out, and he does a very good job producing too. So Brandon, thank you for being the keyboard man today. Our guest today is one Gregory Ward. That's right. We have Brandon Ward at the keyboard and Gregory Ward as the guest. It is the most awarding show of the season so far. And my dad jokes don't get me paid. So if you'd like to tip me, you can tip me on hand cash at Kurt. Again, fill the box with comments. We are going to cut to an ad, and Brandon's going to shut me up. And then after the ad, we're going to talk to Greg about, well, he's always got all kinds of cool stuff. Actually, nobody's got more like little cool building blocks coming out more consistently than Greg. I feel like every time we talk, he's like, so I got these 6 things. So, and they're always cool. It's always good stuff. So, Mr. Brandon Ward, if you could cut to the ad, we'll be back in probably a minute.
ESV is more than another chaotic commodity craze. BSV blockchain can do more than just be a crypto investment. It can help you get more out of your games, share more of your art. BSV makes more things possible.
Hey.
Hey, what's going on, my brother Kurt?
Oh man, living the dream in many ways, my friend. So also living something of a nightmare in many other ways. So it's a good thing we're optimistic. Uh, I'm kidding for anybody. I'm okay. So, you are always up to. So me and you had a call. I don't know, 3 weeks ago. We were working on one of your super secret projects. I don't want to out it or anything, but I did see the thing we were talking about as a YouTube ad. So maybe.
Sure.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you know who's advertising?
Well, I don't know if it's taken a public marketing from that company or not, but we'll go ahead.
Just as a YouTube user, I was literally doing like watching my completely non-business Kurt is watching YouTube nonsense, which for me is like conspiracy theories, cryptids, is Bigfoot real? Maybe something about like, masculine, like here's how to work out your upper chest as I sit here unable to do exercise because I'm about 2.5 weeks post surgery here. But anyways, so no, I see it come up and it's like it's this whole ad of like brought to you by BSV blockchain and SmartLedger, and it's like a drone clip of like hovering over a field that is presumably growing something of value. So that's what I saw, and I was like, oh, I guess I can bring this up on the show. But what are you guys up to, man?
Well, so I haven't seen that commercial yet specifically, but it brings to light just the idea of the environment and what's happening with BSV, what's happening with blockchain, and the environment. What's the ecological footprint of blockchain in general? How do we measure that? What standards do we have from the past, and what can we do? What can we do to improve those standards to give individuals and companies more insight? So, if that commercial was alluding to it, SmartLedger in collaboration with the BA, we put together a project called the Web3 Energy Index. And so essentially we're looking at comparing BTC, BCH, and BSV as three, popular or competing proof of work blockchains. We go into section why we describe why we're measuring proof of work versus proof of stake, why we think that proof of work is a greater source of data integrity due to the economic incentive model that proof of work has. And as well as the Sybil attack possibility that proof of stake might have. So we compare proof of work and we look at BTC as an example of 7 transactions per second. And what are we getting for the amount of hash rate that's exerted to get 7 transactions, right? We're getting 7 transactions a second globally.
Yeah.
What is that utility wise, right? And does the global audience agree that is worth the amount of energy that's consumed for that amount of utility?
Yeah.
And so long story short, we're comparing that with BSV, which obviously with an unbounded block size allows us to have just as the network usage increases, the block size increase. So therefore, now we're able to take that amount of energy divided by the amount of transactions per block, and we're able to actually measure what is your transactional footprint and what is the abilities for BSV to compete with Visa or other, legacy technologies and start to replace them.
No, it's funny because I've seen it illustrated. I can't remember what city they used as an illustration, but it was something like Dayton, Ohio or something. Like when you have 7 transactions per second, it's basically every person in a city like Dayton could do like maybe 2 transactions a week or something like that before it becomes untenable. And I find that fascinating, to talk about global money and the new global standard. And it's like, well, like we couldn't even do Dayton and Cincinnati, so that's not really something special there. But But doing that work, that's one of those metrics that's been talked about a lot, actually, for, I think it's probably been 3 years, maybe more, where there's been a site that'll pop up and then it kind of goes away, and the site pops up, but it's always like, it's a narrative, and then it doesn't really go anywhere. And I'm not really sure why, I'm not sure why people find it so irritating, but I've had, the small blocker types like, oh, you're just trying to find a way to spin your low hash rate as some kind of positive. And, but I look at it and I think it's very clear. It's like, well, here's absolute consumption versus what can be done with absolute consumption. So it's a little bit like, if we have two trains and they're the same size engine and the same size on the same size track and all this other stuff, and they're going to go to the same destination, would it be better to have 1,000 cars hooked to it? Or is it good to only have one car hooked to it? Like, from an efficiency standpoint, like if I were to propose this to the EU and say, okay, so we've got this great idea for a train. It's going to do all these things. You can only do one car for decentralization. So,
well, that's a great point. It's not to interrupt you, but like, you're not talking about just foreign technologies, right? We're not talking about apples and oranges. We're talking about really the same root, and we're talking about the protocol. If we're talking about Satoshi's vision and why we speak about Satoshi's vision on the white paper, if you were to look at Satoshi's early writings, he says it will end up in data centers. If we're talking about, the purposes of peer-to-peer cash, transactions, well, then you have to have efficiency and scalability to even enable what the early day users experienced with their laptops, because you could experience that when there is no traffic blocking up the network. But it's the same protocol. So some people say, oh, digital gold. It's a narrative they created. I love the idea of 21 million scarcity, because I think that maybe we could even find some Satoshi writings that speak about some of these aspects. Yep. But if you have that same protocol in BSV, which is against Bitcoin, and it does all the things that they want in this 21 million scarcity effect, but it has all the capabilities of everything else, it makes no sense that you wouldn't examine the utility and all of what it brings you.
Yeah.
And then one last thing, if you're going to exert energy, right? If you're going to exert energy, people will say, holy cow, a whole town worth of energy. Yeah. Okay. Well, what are we getting in return? Because maybe BTC at one point I was seeing it was 0.3 or 0.03% of whatever, we could look at, the energy index and see what it is, but the global airline industry is much greater. It's like 10 times, 100 times greater than BTC and BCP combined. So it's what's the value that we're deriving societally out of the energy consumption? Because if a whole town worth of energy is diverted into data integrity and a whole new economy of micropayments, and it's benefiting society in a whole new way, well, then they could say, we could deal with that. We'll build some extra things. We'll use some extra fossil fuels.
No, for sure. Well, it's kind of like, nobody looks at the energy expenditure of a region and says, well, all right, let's start by closing hospitals. Hospitals consume a lot of energy, right? So, it's one of those things where we just kind of say, look, we want to live in a world where the net benefit of having good hospital infrastructure is there. And, I might not use the hospital even once a decade, but when I gotta go, I really want it to be like tip top. And so that's a societal cost we're willing to bear. Like, keep the lights on, keep the computationally expensive machines all running, and all this other stuff. So now it's interesting because that sort of digital gold only narrative, and I want to stress, like, BSV is not anti-digital gold. We just think that digital gold doesn't need to be slow and expensive. But ultimately, if we can take that digital gold narrative and say, look, if you're gonna spend the energy anyways, look at how much other stuff we can do with it. It's actually one thing that's really stood out to me in the trial watching is how much, like, Craig and Craig's other witnesses talking about, like, oh yeah, no, like immutable logs and a timestamp server and like these logging events for security and all these other things that it was doing for my bank or my farm or my, all these examples of people saying, oh yeah, Craig pitched me on this brilliant idea. And, and you see the COPA people literally laughing. They're looking at each other like, oh, these idiots, they think a blockchain has something to do with farming or banking or whatever else, and like, but these people are impassioned. They see the value of, wow, we can be efficient here. And so it's almost like we have this, like, I don't know what it is. It's like you got a Rubik's cube and like half of it is just shaped wrong, and you just kind of can't make them stick to each other and say, oh, here's a good idea. And I don't know where that split started, but you're absolutely right. And when you say that, hey, if you're gonna spend it anyways, why don't we spend that energy on building like fractally important infrastructure for all kinds of things? And then you get the BTC narrative, like, no, keep spending more money on more energy forever, because that number's going up, and you better hope you got some sats in your wallet because you're going to be rich. And
it's really interesting. It's, I know you and I have spoken about this before, and we have some other numbers and some sites that we've shown back and forth to each other with the mining and the halving event.
for sure.
And I think that that's just so important to look at. I don't know if it's time to go into this, but we'll just touch on it at least, which is you have energy expenditure, and the market. You could say, okay, well, market forces will always play itself out, and then therefore maybe the BTC crowd will say, well, therefore the number's already shooting up. You see, our narrative is right, Greg, right? Yeah. It's doubling already, and therefore when we lose half of our subsidy, which just calculated outward, if you calculate this hash rate globally, you multiply it by or divide it by like say a basic ASIC, by an ASIC, and you get that kilowatts, and you multiply by your commercial electricity cost, you will almost to the T get what that subsidy is. Yep. I mean, I'm talking about to the dollar, right? So therefore, by natural, fact, when the subsidy is cut in half, if the price doesn't rise, well, then they're losing substantial amounts of money, or the fees got to go way up, which is going to make the user experience just terrible. Again, you're talking about $25 amounts worth that you have in your wallet. You just gone. You can't spend it anymore, right? It's just, you count that lost, which is just, again, it's counter narrative and counter the white paper. Yeah. When you're talking about a peer-to-peer cash.
Well, stranded UTXOs, man. I bring this up every once in a while, and I've scared a few small blockers when they talk about it. And I'm like, well, how many UTXOs do you have? And you have them be like, huh? Like, I have my wallet. Like, yeah. But how many UTXOs do you have? Because if you're spread out and you've only got, $20 worth of BTC spread out, 50 each of 20 UTXOs, and then all of a sudden you want to go send your stuff, you're going to do that UTXO calculation on a day when it's $50 fees to make a spend, and you don't have a single spendable UTXO in your whole wallet. And they're like, nah, bro, you don't know what you're talking about. You see them get the like, oh, Kurt's trying to trick me is what they're thinking. And then they'll go ask, somebody who's a little more technical, understands like systemically, and they're like, oh yeah, no, you got to wait for low fee days to consolidate your UTXOs so that you can do, and they're like, wait, what the what?
Well,
and, yeah.
But tell me if I'm crazy. So let's extrapolate it out for a moment and say that. So the narrative is that the subsidy, which it is exactly that. We know what the word in English means. It's a subsidization, right? Where the system subsidizes the miners until what happens? Until the transaction fees overtake and can overtake, and therefore the subsidy can go away. What does it take for the transaction fees to overtake it? It takes network volume and activity. If the transaction fees go so high that a bunch of people can't use their UTXOs at all, you got that. Yep. You got the ETF, which is now taking it and pushing it off to a secondary platform. Now you're getting traders in Lightning and secondary ETF platforms, so the miners aren't getting that fee.
Right.
So then the miners have to then, raise their costs to to compensate for electricity, and it just seems that this so-called death spiral that people complain about that being mentioned, it seems inevitable. Or at least let's mention on the other side, which why not have a thriving activity full of life and economy, microtransactions up to macro transactions?
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. And I make this example, and when people are like, "Well, does it make sense?" I mean, look at these days, and frankly, it has been really profitable to mine BTC on those days when like ordinals are really spiking and all that other
Yeah.
stuff. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you actually are replacing the subsidy with fees for I don't even know. It might be like 10 days out of the whole like last year for but it is an example of like, oh wow, this is juicy. And so all of a sudden they start to understand, hey, fees matter. But then they're really excited that the high fees are actually driving down use because they just want the ledger really small, which I find also fascinating. But I always make the example and I say, okay, look, you can make money in two ways. Think about the restaurant business. So you could be like Peter Luger's Steakhouse, for example. It's like one of the oldest fancy steakhouses in New York City, and it's a few $100 a plate to have a really good steak, right? But you kind of can't scale that business model out because it's famous because it's a legendary spot and they've got old ovens and it's a whole experience thing, right? But not everybody on earth can go to Peter Luger's. And even if you're pretty wealthy, you can be like upper middle class and still just kind of like, it's kind of an ordeal. Like it's an all night thing. It's $500 to go there for a date. And like, yeah, I can afford it, but it's also, you got to wear a suit jacket. You know, it's just this whole rigmarole, right? But then you've got your like McDonald's, for example, is a
Mhm.
completely different business model. And they're only making a few cents profit or, something like that on every single burger, but they sell 1 billion burgers a year globally. And now you say, okay, which business would you want to be in? Do you want to be the owner of Peter Luger's, or do you want to be a shareholder, a major shareholder in McDonald's? And the answer is you can get rich either way. You can do pretty damn well for yourself. But the
Mhm.
McDonald's business model changed the whole world. In many ways made the world a better place. Now you can argue from a health standpoint, probably made the world a worse place. But we're coming from the place that didn't need burgers. You go to the rest of the planet, and a lot of places are like, oh wow, this is actually really cheap. It's decent food and all this other stuff. Like it's a piece of infrastructure in places that didn't have a piece of infrastructure like that before. And so BSV is a little bit like the hey man, we can serve 1 billion people around the world, and we get to have that conversation now where like we're creating all this other spillover benefits of supply chain and all these people around the world that have jobs because McDonald's exists and all these other things. And that's what BSV wants to do. It wants to create opportunity for the whole planet. And Peter Luger's wants to create opportunity for upper middle class to very, very wealthy in a very small jurisdiction that can go there sometimes and say, wow, I had a Peter Luger steak and it was, I'm gonna blog about it or something. And so there's very, very, very different mindsets between uh, big blockers and niche economies versus, or small blockers and niche economies, and big blockers and these sort of fractal, abundant, scalable economies.
You,
So that's my thought on it.
yeah, no, I love it. So it reminds me, the thought that just came into my mind was trickle down economy,
Yeah.
right? There's this idea, and I'm not even saying it's wrong because I think there's aspects of trickle down, so-called, right? So I guess from what I understand, trickle down is you have wealthy, and then if you have wealthy, then the wealth trickles down into the economy in whatever way. So it could be that I create a business that creates employee, the abilities for employees to be employed, and therefore it creates and generates wealth for the society. That's cool, and I think there's something to that. But there's also like maybe something in the small blockers that, and it can only be this to some degree. And I say to some degree because only they know their own minds. But like, so this idea of it's got to be this or it's got to be that. It feels like it's mostly added because they're part of the camp that has a lot of wealth in each coin, so they don't want to lose that
Right.
wealth, and they don't want to be challenging the narrative. But we know that Satoshi didn't envision it that way. So let's not like fool ourselves. So therefore you jumped into a narrative that societally valued it in whatever XYZ ways, whether it be from Tether, whether it be from funding from this way, whether it be nefarious things that caused the fights to happen that we saw on the stages with Mike Hearn and these guys, and saying, I can't take it. And so it's a narrative of like an almost anarchical, almost childlike. Then it's somehow transformed into, look, Michael Saylor's all into it. And look, BlackRock's getting into it. I'm so excited. How does it go from I'm an anarchist to I'm excited about the biggest assets under manager, BlackRock, getting involved. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it
But
is. It's a very weird pivot. Like I'll accept somebody like Michael Saylor or whatever, and being like, oh, that's cool. He's tech bro or whatever. But like, dude, you start cheering about Larry Fink, and I'm just like, sorry,
well,
I
and
don't
they all
get it.
can exist on it, but it's just funny.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm making commentary. So, you know, I mean, forgive me, you know, I mean, all those who, you know, take offense, it's not my purpose. It's just funny. I see lots of guys who fought against it, and the same guys are very excited because their numbers went up. So therefore, I'm just making the point of number go up sometimes is the tribe that you go into. Whereas like, okay, so let's get back to what it is again. Like you said earlier. Well, is it money, right? Is it currency? Like Craig pointed out the other day, I think it's not legal tender, right? So it's not, and we know if you make enough of it, they're going to come after you with KYC. So like, so I'm always curious, like how I can benefit those in developing nations, or just all nations. I guess that's the point I like about Bitcoin. It's a timestamp ledger for everyone, extremely accessible, and firewalled private, identity.
Yep.
So now we have data integrity at extremely cheap. What that changes everything. We could firewall identity, but somehow and still attach it. That changes everything.
Yep.
I could send a penny from here to Africa. That changes everything, right? So all these things change everything simply because of an extremely cheap, globally available timestamp server, just a notepad.
Yep.
Just a notepad.
No, it's incredible. Well, it's funny because, again, watching this trial, and I'm kind of, mentally immersed in it because I've done nothing else for over 2 weeks now. And just watching Craig and the other witnesses, frankly, at this point, just getting excited and getting passionate about, immutable timestamps, and you see the other side just like, what is going on? What are these idiots talking about? And, and Craig even goes into, because at some point he got asked, solicitor, I think it was Solicitor Huff, was like, well, Dr. Wright, what does that even mean? And he actually mentioned CertaHash. Craig says, well, CertaHash is an example of the stuff that I was trying to initiate for this bank. And it's just a log, it makes it immutable logging because, and you still see, like, and Huff is still like looking up at the judge. And again, like he's trying to solicit. I think he's trying to solicit. I guess he's a solicitor. So he's trying to solicit the WTF is going on. What is this psycho talking about? Is what is facial expression. That's what he's trying to get the judge to, sort of drop on everybody. And so it's a really weird thing. But pivoting a little bit to CertaHash, I know you guys have created a lot of new headway. I made some steps. I see the transactions on chain. A couple, I think what's on chain is actually filtering for CertaHash data now. So I was playing with the filters the other day and was like, oh cool, there's a CertaHash button here. And just watching it happen, and all of that's really cool. But what's it like on your side? How are things going? And what's the update on CertaHash related stuff?
Sure. Yeah, things are going great. We have been meeting with a lot of different clients, onboarding a few different partners, still having people giving feedback and testing. I think this is a new thing for everybody. It's new for people to be introduced to interfacing blockchain into their networks and into their system in general. Yeah. So I think just to have, we were just talking about it earlier, an audit trail, right? Just have a simple audit trail on a quick interval. It makes a big difference for the internal and external view into what's happening in your network. When you can add into that, comparing the hashes and the fingerprints of what's going on inside of that network, and capturing those things and the administrators' reactions to what happened. That again, it's an audit trail, globally accessible, privately accessible to those who have the right to see it. So I think it's a big deal. But similarly to how Craig talks about Bitcoin, and Timecoin and Bitcoin in relationship to what this timestamp server is. It's like CertaHash is a small piece. It's a huge piece. You know, I mean, it's inserting itself blockchain into the detection phase of the NIST cybersecurity framework. But we're also building, and that's, I guess, the exciting thing for me is within CertaHash, we're building other modules that address these other aspects of it, from identity of resources to recovery of assets.
Yeah.
So no, it's exciting, and it was exciting to hear Craig talk about it. I literally was sitting right where I am, and I turned my head. I said, "He just said CertaHash." I said,
Yeah.
"Oh my goodness!" I picked up the phone. I called Brian real quick.
No, it is. I mean, it's such a cool thing, and it really, I don't know. I guess it's sad to me that because of all this sort of Bitcoin Civil War stuff, that we can't be excited about something like that as a broader ecosystem. Like you would think that blockchain, just blockchain agnostic sorts would be like, oh, cool, like this is pretty cool that this stuff is being talked about. No, it's literally the whole world against the BSV people, Aussie bad man, as it were. So pretty frustrating. But everybody, if you're watching, please let everybody know that we're watching live, and we have Greg Ward on talking about all kinds of cool stuff. And also subscribe, hit the alert bell. But live questions coming soon. Greg, you need to leave in a little less than 15 minutes, I think.
About 15 minutes. Yep.
Yeah.
Shout out to the whole SmartLedger team and CertaHash.
For sure. Now, I just wanted to kind of give you the floor. Anything else that you're up to? I talked to Brian a little earlier, and he was talking about how you're talking about getting more transactions on chain with some other thing. And the funny thing, so it's when I talk to you, Brian or Sean, it's always like, "Hey, Kurt, have you seen?" Like there's always all this stuff going on, and like I love you guys, but it's a little bit like, hey, I need to have you on the show. I need to have one of you guys on the show every, 2 or 3 months, or I'm going to get behind. So what else are you working on? What else are you excited about?
So first of all, I think through apps these days. If someone starts speaking, I think I start to create an app for the conversation. So I jokingly say that, but I just really enjoy interacting with the team and thinking about these things, and taking, again, what we're calling a timestamp server, or some of these small features and functionalities, these little modules, and putting different faces and plugging them together in different ways. So some fun things. Let's say Alex Mann, who is our partner with Smart Grow Agritech. He's also working with the BA now. He's been instrumental in reaching out to some of the IoT device companies. We're capturing a lot.
Another really good guy, by the way. Like I've only met him briefly in the past, but I've gotten to have a couple of conversations with him recently, and it's like the best people get it.
Yeah. No, he's solid. He's not only a very intelligent guy, but he's a really good-hearted gentleman, and passionate about the technology, passionate about how he's applying blockchain. So him and I met, like I said, I'm actually going to be meeting up with him in 15 minutes to demonstrate CanaTrack. So CanaTrack is our hemp certificate of analysis publishing tool that we're allowing cannabis producers and labs to publish certificates of analysis of hemp analysis. So that way these producers can paste a label of the QR code on the back of a bottle of hemp product. Consumer can scan it and see the certificate of analysis, trace it on the blockchain.
Nice.
So that's one piece. And then Alex is doing a lot with putting these IoT devices out in the fields of hemp, and also wineries, capturing all that data and putting it on chain for all lots of good stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, what a journey with him. It was funny. When I realized he was a smart guy, we were talking about little weather stations that individually collect data and all this stuff, and we started to talk about what's the best way to do this. And I realized, like, oh, this kid's really sharp. He's got a lot of stuff going on, both in his head and in real life that's being implemented. But just that kind of thing. Those sorts of things that I think I was thinking of, 15, 20 years ago myself, like, hey, this would be a cool thing, but I have no idea how to do it. Like, Bitcoin was kind of a necessary missing piece, or even cloud computing, for example, would have, which is how a lot of these things are implemented now. But going back 20 years, it's like, wouldn't it be cool if you could put a little computer that was sort of measuring everything on everything, right? And it's like, yeah, sure, but how are we going to do that? Now, Internet of Things is pretty passé. Internet of Things itself is not a new idea even anymore, but now it's about that data control. And how do you make these concepts of I always used to joke, like, yeah, Internet of Things, it's when your toaster and your refrigerator, team up against you, but in reality, if you can control that data and utilize the data for something valuable, there's so much, not between your toaster and fridge necessarily, but in a like a farm, for example, or an automated factory, or any kind of thing where there's large aggregate data that, if processed properly, can create all kinds of overflow value. So it's almost like, where do you start? What do you pick?
You're talking about a whole state worth of farms. So then now a state can have auditable data that they could, over years, track trends. Now you have farms that can monetize. We were just talking about this earlier, right? Today, which is, everyone has value. Everyone has assets under management. Yeah. What is that assets under management? Is it your data of your social media? Is it your farm data out in your IoT collected, main farm? Mm-hmm. Is it your watching hours on your TV? I'm reminding me of Craig, talking about driving down the road and saying, "Hey, move over, dude. I'll offer you $10, right, or whatever."
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
And it's not to make everything transactional, because it makes me play devil's advocate. It's not about that. It's returning value back to yourself to say, how do I want to utilize who I am and what I do? Because formerly, these aspects of ourselves have been monetized without us knowing it most of the time, right?
For sure. No, for each of your examples, there's some billionaire out there who's like, yeah, you're damn right, you're valuable.
Thank you for providing it, sir.
Yes.
It's true.
No, it's a fascinating thing. Well, and I say that all the time. Like, it's funny talking about, COPA. There was a guy on the stand from Spiral, and he was being asked, like, so what is Spiral? What do you do? And he's like, well, we're a module inside of Block and all this. And he's like, well, what does Block do? And he's like, well, and it's all these things. It's like, ultimately, it's like, this is Jack Dorsey's, giant matrix machine that's trying to suck the life out of everybody that doesn't want to do business with him. But then you talk about like Mark Zuckerberg and some of these other people where, Mark is making pennies off of however many billion people are on Facebook, and or the aggregate of Facebook and Instagram and whatever else is under the Meta empire now. But it's all these things where, there wasn't a practical way to unlock, maybe my value on Facebook is worth $20 a year or something, but how do you pay me out for whatever traffic and ad revenue that I generate? Like, A, it's hard to calculate, and B, it's hard to make those payments. But again, if you were to integrate a micropayment solution and some kind of a token that has a global value, as opposed to, well, sorry, it's got to be a penny, and it's like, well, it doesn't got to be anything. We just need to decide what it needs to be. I wonder what that world would look like if somebody like Mark Zuckerberg wasn't convinced, if you didn't have to trick him into coming to like BSV or some token on it or something, but where it would start to be silly for him not to. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people need to think about too. Like, I was a big Twitch user. I think it's great. Same with all the other like Hodl Locker and all these sort of social apps I think are good. But I think fundamentally there are proofs of concept. And ultimately, it's that concept that needs to be transplanted up, because somebody like Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or other people realize, I have to go this way or I'm going to become obsolete. There's a 5-year window where I can dig my heels on and I can be a lot poorer in a decade, or I can decide to get ahead of the curve and allow people maybe not to own their own data, but to at least monetize the data that you're giving to the universe, right? And so I don't know. I don't know how to make that transition or make that pitch even, or who you would talk to, but
Well, first of all, I think that people are used to free stuff, right?
For sure.
I mean, and I don't think it's not saying a bad thing, but it's what we're used
No,
to, certain,
but it's true.
right?
Yeah,
Radio. We drove in our cars. We had heard the radio.
yeah,
There's always some form of something free. I think we love the ideas of what Bitcoin and BSV could do. Certainly, we know as a side joke, it's very hard to get, right? So, and that's probably from America all the way to Africa, right? So it's just hard. Can you go down to the corner store and go put $1 on something and get BSV? Certainly not my town right now.
yeah.
But I would certainly pay for a lot of different, stuff, like all sorts of stuff from a movie to different things. Now, I think that there's something to be said about if I am putting on an event and I know majority of what I'm doing here is because I'm doing this, that people are going to enjoy XYZ, then maybe I deserve to make XYZ profit off of it because I put it on. But if you're having a situation where enough people are coming in now, them being there and their participation now makes it something cool too.
Yeah.
Now that also becomes like at least a relationship that you could offer back some value at the very least. You know what I mean? I'm not pushing for socialism and everybody's got, people will get involved and all of a sudden, oh, you owe me because I made your platform cool. Where's my 10%? Where's my 5%?
But I think actually people are starting to understand why that's valuable. That's actually one of the things. I don't really like Elon Musk. I've never really been a fan of Musk, but I think the big thing, and I say this as a creator, I am something of an internet personality, pretty low level, but ultimately I make a little bit of money using X.com every day, where I was a free Twitter user and making Jack Dorsey rich, and now like I get monthly payouts from subscribers on the platform, and I get my ad revenue share from that platform. And so there's a pretty big threshold. I think you have to have a minimum of like 5 million valuable interactions, and valuable, some algorithm that they've created. But I'm just over that threshold. I get, somewhere between 5 and 6 million valuable interactions a month. And so I get a little bit of an ad revenue share for my contribution to X.com, which I'd love to see the math on what it is, because it's not a lot of money. It's like less than $100 a month is what I'm getting from the ad revenue thing. But I'd be very curious to see, okay, so if I'm worth whatever it is, let's say it's $75, what is Greg Ward worth? Or what is the person worth that has 1,000 followers? Because it is something, and it's just impractical to use Stripe or PayPal, which are the options on the platform. But if it could be done in a micropayment system in a decentralized way and all this other stuff, like all of a sudden everybody's a content creator, and there's, whatever, 1 billion people using former Twitter, X.com.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, well, every verified view, right? If we call it that, I'm going to trademark that. Every verified, every verified view should receive a small micropayment, because you allowed Elon to gather some attention, right?
Yep.
So it's like the basic attention token for was it Brave browser, I think.
Yep.
I love it. I think that there's something to that, very much so. And I think that it lends itself to all sorts of things, to stock options, vested interest, all sorts of fun things that you could do.
For sure.
Now that might be an interesting place where, and I actually got only a couple minutes, so I shouldn't get too deep into this.
Yeah. No, wrap up whenever you need to. I got a bunch of questions I can take too, so no worries.
Yeah. No, I'll just finish up. Don't. Zip it.
Greg, always a pleasure. Thanks for coming on. I miss you, man. I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Am I going to see you in London in May?
I plan on being there. So yeah, any chance I can get to be around the family, I would definitely love to be there.
For sure. Cool, man. Well, be well, be yourself, be good to each other, all that jazz. So thanks again, man.
Cheers, Kurt. Cheers, everyone.
All right. See you soon. All right. So if you're still watching, and I hope you're still watching, I know Greg has much, much, much better hair than I do, but Trying to hold it together for you, everybody. Please put the questions in the box. I'm going to start going through these questions as they come. Brandon, please be liberal with letting the questions through. I will take anything. The spicier, the better here. Mr. Tech House, I chimed in a little late, but wanted to get this question out. At what TPS would Bitcoin be more energy efficient than transacting with legacy banking, e.g. using Visa? So there's a few data points necessary for me to know that number. If we can find the data points. So how much power consumption does Visa have? I don't know that figure. They probably publish it somewhere because they probably have some kind of climate commitment or something that explains how much that they are consuming. If we can figure out that number, and then we can figure out how much BSV is consuming, and obviously that would have to be a little bit of a fluctuating thing because hash power can come and go as it pleases. But you can come up with an aggregate for how much that's being done. Oh, I'm seeing Messy Times, Mr. Christopher Messina saying 2,000 TPS. So he has apparently done his due diligence, which I would expect nothing less from such a gentleman. But it is something like that. Like if we see transactions that cross the threshold, at the very least, we know that if we were to have as many transactions per day as Visa, we would be more efficient because BSV is definitely consuming less power than Visa is consuming. So if you can pass them up in the per day average, we definitely win. I just don't know what the actual threshold is. It might be 2,000 TPS, but somebody show me the math, please. So let's keep it going. More questions, please. Nelson, one of our frequent question askers. What's the most common misconception about BSV and how to address? It's funny. This keeps coming up in the trial with COPA, where they keep trying to basically explain that BSV and Craig are inextricably linked. He's like, well, what does the Satoshi vision mean if you are purported to be Satoshi in this ecosystem? And it's so funny because if you go back to 2018, which wasn't that long ago, and a lot of this is very public information, Craig didn't want there to be a split. In fact, Craig said he'd be willing to, fight against the split forever. I'm going to orphan all forks, in this predatory hash war and Bitcoin Cash and blah, 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 blah. So what happened is we sort of had a gentleman's agreement in the Bitcoin Cash community to have a hash war, and whoever had the most hash power and, follow the rules of Nakamoto consensus, one side gets orphaned and the other side is, the real Bitcoin Cash. And so, at the 11th hour, or literally the 12th hour, the network split at the fork date. And then all of a sudden, it didn't matter how much hash power was there or not. There was not, I'm going to sneeze. Hang on. No boogers, please. I think I'm good. Oh, that really hurt though. I had hernia surgery like 2 weeks ago. So, okay, I'm fine. Focus. That hurt. Sneezing hurts. Everything else is fine. Sneezing hurts. Okay, so the network split and we could not figure out how to reorg. And we're looking into it. Okay, why is a reorg not happening? And so we figured there must be something with the software. What is going on in the software? So people start digging into it, and we realize that there is a rolling checkpoint that has been distributed, like software has been distributed to all these exchanges that basically works as a checkpoint that checks not to see who has the most proof of work, but checks, is this using the Bitcoin ABC reference client? And that created a split in the network. And so the split in the network was done predatorily. Like the people who became the BSV community, we came in to have an honest competition for there to not be a BSV blockchain. We didn't want there to be a BSV. And I say we in like, I personally did not want there to be a BSV. Craig publicly talked about how he did not want there to be BSV. We did not want a separate BSV blockchain at all. So this notion that BSV is a creation of Craig's or part of some master plan to enrich Craig in some way, or Craig and Calvin, or whatever, insert shady cabal figure into your narrative as you will. We were upset. It was an extremely irritating and upsetting time. I remember talking briefly to Jimmy Wynn, who was like beside himself, distraught. I remember a couple of the people inside at people that ended up working at places like CoinGeek or at some of the mining companies and what, like everybody was depressed. It was upsetting because we didn't actually even want there to be a Bitcoin cash fork. We all, like, we were the people that wanted to fight for Bitcoin forever. And then we kind of haphazardly decided, okay, I guess we'll do this Bitcoin cash thing because now we have no allies over here in Bitcoin Core anymore. And then we kind of got booted out of the project that we cared about the most. Like, we were the real big blockers, the biggest of the big blockers. And just the whole thing, it's like we got attacked from both directions and just whatever. So the misconception that BSV being its own chain is some kind of a, you know, we desire to have this chain that Craig controls or nChain controls or something, like, that is not only just wrong, it is like insultingly inaccurate because nobody wanted it. Everybody was upset that it happened, and it was done to us as a stab in the back. So that's the biggest misconception that I can think of. Next question, please. Thoughts on the BSV I did it. The BSV Association network access rules, the NAR or alert system. So I have not gone in and done a thorough read of their entire announcement. I saw their social media announcement, but because of like, again, I've been getting up at 4:30 every morning and focused on the trial stuff, I have not taken a deep dive on network access rules. Now, my knee-jerk reaction, I remember when DARA, the Digital Asset Recovery, whatever it stood for, when that came out about a year ago, my knee-jerk reaction, it was literally, I don't like it, not the way I want it to go. And then I remember somebody brought up, I don't remember who said it, but they basically were saying, like, this is actually kind of what Bitcoin Foundation was meant to do. And so I looked into it and, you know, looked into kind of the history of Bitcoin. Now, over the last 6 months or so, I've really had a very rough realization about the fact that I was such an idealist and such an optimist that for me, I looked at Bitcoin, when was it? 2012 would be 12 years ago now. And like when I first looked into Bitcoin, obviously I didn't understand it initially, and probably, you know, you could say maybe I even still don't understand it. But looking at Bitcoin initially, I looked at the incentives of proof of work and said, this is objectively going to make people better. The incentives here are going to make Bitcoin a good thing because it will incentivize people to be good to each other. And looking back now, I have to admit, as a libertarian at heart in every regard, I was a voluntarist, anarchist, activist. This is what brought me to Bitcoin and all these things. And I look at it now in the hindsight of 15 years of Bitcoin, and I say, you know, Bitcoin, most people that have got involved in Bitcoin has made objectively worse people. These are people that they want nothing more than to be mean to other people and bully them into being the type of culture that they want, to make fun of people for their missteps, to sort of guide people into this world where we're all sort of governed by this brutalism. And all that's, you know, it's very interesting. I like this sort of Spartan aspect to, hey man, may the strongest survive. Like, I'm 6'3". I'm, you know, when I'm not recovering from surgery, I'm quite a dominating figure. I'm a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. I fight for fun. I've been an MMA coach for you know 10 years or more. Like, I like to fight. In a world where we're all going to have kind of a brutalist, you know, may the strongest survive, I've got pretty good chances of being one of those people that survive if we're going to go entirely on our merits for the ability to brutalize other people. But the harsh realization for me is not that Bitcoin will make people more peaceful or more kind or more wise or more cooperative. It has made them the opposite. It's not even been neutral. It has made people objectively worse. And so looking at this network access rules stuff, I look at that and say, you know, my immediate response is, ugh, like who's going to be the person to make the call that something is an attack, right? Now, as a node operator, I look at that and say, okay, if somebody's making the network bad, either by malice or by their, you know, just something stupid they're doing that is causing some kind of chaos, that I would have argued that it was like Gorilla Pool's job to perhaps start to orphan blocks and hope that Tal and other miners will follow and build on our blocks from where we have decided to orphan them. The problem is that, you know, Gorilla Pool we're a minority chain, and there's all this like what if governance related stuff. And so while I've could see it being distastefully implemented. I also don't think it will be used very often because it would be very, very difficult to use in a lot of ways. But ultimately, I wonder if it could be worse than seeing what a problem, what a essentially bad thing Bitcoin has been for most people anyways. And so I guess for me, like, I've sort of had to humble myself and take a step back and say, you know what? The thing that I thought would work really, really well hasn't worked really, really well. And so maybe my base assumptions are inaccurate. And if that's the case, then, well, what's the harm in trying something else? Now, of course, that's famous last words, and you know, the great dictator takes over and the world crumbles around it. And I was the one saying, like, hey, maybe we should give that a try. So I don't know. I'm still sort of formulating my own position on it, and I haven't really given it a whole lot of deep thought, but that's sort of my processing it on the fly, essentially. Next question. Let's bang out a few more. Mo Miller, how you doing? There are only 21 million Bitcoins, and there are around 10 billion people in our beautiful world. Please explain how this would work. What happens to those who will not have any? So I actually hate the term Bitcoin when people talk about there's only 21 million. This is my least favorite meme. Like, scarcity, yes, is a very important principle for Bitcoin. But the way that scarcity is explained is objectively false. There's not 21 million coins, because each coin is itself a set of subcoins, and there is not any difference between the full Bitcoin and all the way down to the sat. So each Bitcoin is 100 million sats, meaning that 21 million Bitcoins shakes out to I think it's 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. So little tiny assets, little tiny tokens that can amend or append or move the ledger forward, right? And so in a world where you're trying to accumulate as many Bitcoins because you want the number to go up and you want to be the most rich that you can possibly be, sure, there's 21 million Bitcoins. You want to hold as many as possible because there's only, there's 50 million millionaires in the world, or, whatever the make fiat money math is that the small blockers talk about. It's pretty irrelevant because 2.1 quadrillion tokens on the network, little assets. And of course you can issue further assets atop Bitcoin. So various types of cryptocurrencies or what some people would call CBDCs or tokens like OJBK or whatever else. All these things can be built on Bitcoin too. So no, there is way more than enough sats on the network for anybody and anything that the network needs. Brandon, just so you know, I'm willing to go a couple minutes late just to make sure we get in all these questions because I see a few good ones. So please, let's bring more up and let's answer more. Do you trust anyone who is not part of a shady cabal? It's a funny thing because, I go to church. I'm part of a jujitsu team. I have other friends at like my weightlifting gym and like all these other things. And like, ultimately it's those little like single serving relationships that over time become, hey, we kind of helped raise each other's kids and we end up having a lot of meals a week with each other and all these other things. And then, if you all start to become more successful because of your proximity to each other, all of a sudden you get to a certain point where people that aren't involved are like, hey, there's something really weird going on over there. So while I think there are some examples of really terrible, shady cabals of people that are doing terrible things, I think a lot of times that is also a bit of an overblown meme. So I try to really temper my my conspiracy theory stuff. Like, Bilderberg doesn't allow the media to film or write anything or go inside of any closed door sessions inside of Bilderberg. And well, that bugs me a little bit. But at the same time, like, I'm part of some social clubs too. And if we just had a little bit more money and power and everything else, all of a sudden people would start wondering like, hey, what's Kurt doing over there? And in fact, I've already been victimized by it. I get people asking me all the time, like, what would your life be like if Calvin wasn't paying you to lie? And so, I don't know, but no, good point, Christopher. I think everybody's part of a shady cabal. It's just whether or not we have any undue power and influence that, tips it over the edge. So next one, please. Craig is now an advisor to nChain rather than chief scientist. If so, why and what are the implications? So it's funny. Stephen Matthews actually explained his position on it in court today. This has been speculated on since the announcement last September, But I think it's pretty simple. What Stefan said is that his employment agreement really only was about him getting UK citizenship. He's an Aussie citizen, so he required a visa in order to work in the UK. And then at some point, he became a UK citizen and no longer required to be employed. Now, lots of people know Craig does lots of other things other than nChain. So Craig has like his own philosophy class that he teaches, and he's doing all this other stuff. And he has a lot of inventions that are not related to Bitcoin also. So he works on lots of things, and ultimately, Craig wanted to have a little more freedom to get out there and not be forced to be like, hey, are you on nChain's dime right now when you're inventing something that's completely outside of the blockchain economy? And so Stefan made it sound like it was a very simple, very practical thing. Like they still work together every day since that era and up to, today, literally, that Craig is filing nChain related patents and things. So I think it really is just a contractor thing. I have always preferred to be a contractor myself because I'm the same way. I like to make other relationships. Like I don't work for CoinGeek because I want to be able to work on my mining pool and work on our own software R&D stuff. And I like to also just work on my social affiliate marketing. People have been commenting, they're angry that I've had my thread sponsored by Bezel. And they're like, hey, what the hell is this all about? And it's like, hey man, I'm an independent contractor and I went and got a sponsor for my threads for this week. So tough shit. So I literally think it's nothing more than that. So next question, please. Do you know why Craig chose SHA-256? Thanks. SHA-256 is the most secure hashing algorithm in the world. So it's the best one. A lot of people speculate, it's the NSA created it. It's like, yeah, but that doesn't mean there's a back door. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with it. The fact that the NSA created it is probably a pretty good indicator that it's good. It's also a known open source, kind of thing. Everybody can look at what SHA-256 is and how it works and whatever else. It's just the best algorithm. So I don't think it needs to be any more than that. Next one. Do we have another one? Yep. Where can I see the network activity on the BSV blockchain? There have been times that Rockwall and Electrum take longer than usual. Do you recommend a website to monitor activity or slowdowns in the network? I don't know if there's a specific network degradation tool. I really like BSV data. I think it's bsvdata.com. You can check what's on chain, but I don't think anybody has a tool up that specifically shows what services are up. Now, I will caveat that we have where is that thing? So over at Gorilla Pool, which is the company at which I am a founder, we do have where is our endpoint thing? Status.gorillapool.io will tell you the status of our nodes, Jungle Bus, which is feeding a lot of data to a lot of different companies, also the OneSat ordinals indexers and some other stuff. So you can check there, but that's not going to tell you Electrum status or a couple other things. So unfortunately, I don't know, but that could be a good tool. Maybe we'll build one. Next one. What the heck is Timecoin? Craig's been a little vague. Apparently, Bitcoin is a subset of what Timecoin is capable of. And I kind of think Timecoin is, when Craig talks about Bitcoin at scale and all that MetaNet stuff and all of his really grandiose stuff, I kind of think that's all Timecoin. So, but I don't know. Not totally sure. I have not seen the Timecoin white paper and I have not been asked to testify. Anything else? Mr. Ward, does COPA have anything at all other than every witness is a liar and every document is for... No, that's their entire case. Isn't it funny that bad Aussie man is saying, whatever. Everything he does is evil. Everything he does is a lie. And everyone knows it, so let's all laugh. That's been basically the whole case. So that's it. That's all the questions. I'm wrapping up. I did all of them and only went over by 4 minutes. So thank you and you're welcome. So if you're watching, thank you so much, everybody. I really appreciate your viewership. I appreciate you. I appreciate when you share. I appreciate the likes, the subscriptions, and when you click the alert bell. Please enjoy yourselves and be good to each other. And don't be afraid to throw up a prayer every once in a while, not for just your friends, but also for your enemies. Ultimately, I really hope that Bitcoin allows us at some point to break bread together and for us to mend our wounds and for us to have a bridge from one capitalist tranche to the other where we all say, hey, isn't it better to be business partners or customers to each other than it is to be enemies? That's what I'm here for. I really hope we can get that far too. So thanks everybody. And I will see you next week on the CoinGeek Weekly live stream, where we're actually going to have Connor and Marcin, I believe, from the BSV Association to talk in some depth. Actually, they're going to answer my difficult questions about this network access rules and all that stuff. So there we go, everybody. That's it. Be good to each other. Take care. Bye-bye.
BSV is more than another chaotic commodity craze. BSV blockchain can do more than just be a crypto investment. It can help you get more out of your games, share more of your art. BSV makes more things possible.